Who is the meanest person you have met? I still remember the day my father remarried, and I got a new stepmother and stepsister. At first, everything seemed perfect. My stepsister, Emma, was sweet and friendly, always trying to bond with me. She would help me with my homework, and we would play together during the weekends. I thought I had finally found a sibling I could trust. As time passed, I started to notice that things would go missing or get broken whenever Emma was around. At first, I thought it was just a coincidence, but soon it became a pattern. My clothes would get torn or stained when she did my laundry. And whenever I confronted her about it, she would deny it with a saccharine smile. My father was oblivious to all of this. He was too caught up in his new marriage to notice the subtle ways Emma was sabotaging me. But my stepmother seemed different. She would always take my side when we had arguments about Emma's behavior. "I'm sure Emma didn't mean to break your toy," she would say soothingly. "Let's talk to her about being more careful." Or, "I don't think Emma meant to take your clothes without asking. Maybe we can set up a system for sharing laundry duties." After each argument, she would console me with hugs and reassurance that everything would be okay. One day, Emma took things too far. She framed me for breaking my father's favorite vase, an antique piece that had been passed down through generations. "Emma, did you see who broke the vase?" my father asked sternly. "I saw her do it, Dad," Emma replied quickly. But before my father could react, my stepmother intervened. "Now wait a minute," she said calmly. "Let's not jump to conclusions here. Maybe there's an explanation." She turned to me and asked gently, "Honey, did you break the vase?" I shook my head vigorously as tears welled up in my eyes. "No, that's not true. I didn't touch it." My stepmother nodded sympathetically and turned back to our father. "I think we should listen to both sides of the story before making any accusations," she said firmly. For once, our father listened to her advice and decided not to punish me on the spot. As we left the room together after the argument died down, my stepmother put her arm around me. "Don't worry, sweetie. We'll figure out what really happened. You're not alone in this." I felt so grateful to her for believing in me. Days went by and more incidents occurred. Each time, my stepmother stood up for me against Emma. She even helped me come up with ways to avoid getting sabotaged by Emma. However, with each incident, my father became more and more disappointed in me. According to him, every incident involved me, meaning I should be at least responsible for 4 out of 5 things. I couldn't refute him due to lack of evidence. However, I vowed to prove myself once I had evidence. One day came when Emma ruined an entire project I had worked on for weeks, pouring blood, sweat, and tears into it, just hours before its submission deadline at school. When our parents saw the destroyed project, they were furious. They accused me of being careless, lazy, and irresponsible. What hurt me more was that my stepmother too didn't believe me this time. They grounded me and even asked me to drop out of school. I couldn't take it anymore. The injustice, the lies, the manipulation, it all became too much. So one day, I ran away from home. As tears streamed down my face under the bridge where I sat hiding from everyone, I couldn't help but wonder why nobody ever believed me. Why did my father never stand up for me against that monster Emma? That's when I heard footsteps approaching. It was Emma. "Why are you doing this to yourself?" she asked, feigning concern. "You know exactly what you've done." I shouted back, sobbing. "You've ruined my life. You've made everyone think I'm a liar and a failure. Why can't you just leave me alone?" Emma looked down, her eyes welling up with tears. For a moment, I thought she was finally going to apologize, finally going to admit the truth. But then she spoke and my blood boiled all over again. "My mom told me to do it," she whispered. "She said if I made you look bad enough, Dad would start favoring me more." I felt like I'd been punched in the gut all over again. The person I thought was meanest to me wasn't even acting out of malice. She was just following orders from her mother. But how could that be? The stepmother whom I knew was kind, understanding, and sweet. How could my stepmother be the mastermind? Why would she do that to me? Then it dawned on me. "You're just a pawn in her game, aren't you?" I spat out the words. "You're just a tool for your mother to manipulate our father and get what she wants." Emma nodded, tears streaming down her face. "I'm sorry," she whispered. "I didn't want to do it, but Mom said if I didn't, she would make my life miserable too." At that moment, I realized that Emma wasn't the real enemy. It was our stepmother. She was the one who had orchestrated this entire charade, who had manipulated Emma into sabotaging me at every turn. The audacity of that woman to use her daughter against me and act like a nice person is. I felt a wave of anger wash over me. How could her father be so blind? How could he not see what was happening right under his nose? "I'm going back home," I said, standing up and wiping away my tears. "And this time, I'm going to make sure everyone knows the truth." Emma looked up at me with a mixture of fear and hope in her eyes. For the first time, I saw my stepsister as a victim too, a victim of our stepmother's manipulation. Together, we walked back home in silence. When we got there, our parents were waiting for us in the living room. "Where have you been?" our father asked sternly. "I ran away because of Emma's lies," I said calmly. "But it's not entirely her fault." Our stepmother's eyes narrowed as she sensed something was amiss. "What do you mean?" she asked sweetly. I mean that Emma told me the truth, I said firmly. She told me that you're the one who's been manipulating her into sabotaging me all along. The room fell silent as our father's face turned red with rage, but not towards our stepmother, towards me. How dare you, he thundered at me. You're always making excuses for yourself. You're always blaming others for your own failures. I couldn't believe what I was hearing. My own father didn't believe me. You're lying, he continued to shout at me. You're just trying to deflect attention from your own mistakes. My heart sank as my father turned his back on me once again. If you can't take responsibility for your actions, he growled, then maybe it's best if you leave this house. Tears streamed down my face as Emma watched on in horror. Even she knew how unfair this was. Get out, my father shouted once more. And with those words, everything came crashing down around me. I cried and went upstairs to pack my belongings. When I reached the door, I saw my stepmother who was looking at me with hurt in her eyes. I ignored her and left the house. I had asked my maternal grandmother to pick me up. As I stepped out of the house, neither my dad nor my stepmother came to bid me farewell. My heart ached and I almost cried again. Only Emma followed me out. The resentment that I had towards her lessened, and when my grandmother came, she hugged me. She wasn't bad. Before I could pat her back though, I heard her say in a smug voice, "Finally, you were kicked out." When she pulled away, she motioned me to look in the window's direction. And when I did, my heart sank. My stepmother was looking at me with hurt in her eyes. Before I could say anything, she left. It was then I realized that Emma lied to me again. I left with my grandmother. Later, I tried to apologize to my stepmother, but she never responded ever again.